The day of the pour finally came, and it was just a little bit of a rush morning, but not too bad. We had 4 people to work on the job like we did last time. That worked out really well. It was a little rushed because we had to clear a path for the cement truck to go around to the back of the pad and all the way around the big septic system. And so we had to get out there and mow that really quick in the morning before he got there, because they don't like to drive over weeds. They want to see where they're going. But got that all done. He showed up on time, and we got it kicked off. The cement that I decided to use this time was a little stronger than last time. I went with 4,000 pound concrete instead of 3,000 pounds, so it's a stronger tensile strength. And then also I went with a higher slump. I went with a 5 to 6 slump, which makes it to where it'll run better and fill in small crevices better. And also we bought it from a place that's closer, and so it only took like 20 minutes for it to get here after it was mixed. So this time the concrete that we poured in was really nice. It was wet, it went in well, it was very workable, we had plenty of time to work it. And so it was a big improvement over the first time when the concrete was dry. It had already been in the truck for an hour before it got there, and it was low slump, and it was just a real struggle from the word go. So this worked out much better. Only had to order 9 yards of concrete this time, as opposed to 10.5 yards last time. And it actually was plenty. It filled up the forms perfectly, and we still had enough left over to do a small front porch. We did a 4x6 front porch as well. So that was a nice little touch, and it used the amount of concrete that we had almost perfectly. So that worked out really good. One problem that we did have was when we were pouring, some of the forms gave some. Now they didn't completely fail, but they did bulge and warp some. And so that did end up using more concrete and probably threw our line off a little bit. It wasn't catastrophic. It wasn't too big a deal, but it was something we had to deal with. We could actually at one point hear the boards cracking and popping. So it was a little scary there, but we got through it and turned out all right. After the concrete was finished, we covered the exposed concrete with plastic and put dirt on top of that to keep the plastic in place. And we left the plastic and the forms on for an entire week to get that critical initial cure. While waiting on the concrete to cure, I started gathering up supplies and working on the utilities that'll be underneath the pad. When I originally brought the utilities into the pad side, it was before we knew the exact location, and so I just kind of brought them into the center of the pad because I knew I would need the water and stuff when I was working on the pad. And so that all worked out fine, but I'm to the point now where I need to locate the water and the electric exactly where they're going to be, because we're about to start working on the pad itself. And so I've come in here and I've marked out exactly where I need to bring up the water and the electric to put the panels in place so that they'll be in place before we pour the pad. Unfortunately, as you can see, I'm going to have to dig up that line that I brought in and bring it back, and I'm going to have to go underneath this section of concrete that I poured. I originally poured this here just because I had some extra concrete, and it was where we were planning on putting a wall here, so there will be a wall here, and so it seemed like a good place to put some extra concrete. Unfortunately, now that I need to bring my utilities back over to these marked areas, I'm going to have to bring it back under that concrete strip there and relocate it. So there'll be a little bit of digging involved, but shouldn't be too bad.
So this is an area where we got some of the dirt for our house pad. So Red went ahead and dug out a pond and then also a swale. And so since we've had such a good monsoon season, it's washed down a bunch of clay and sand. So I'm going to try to dig out some of this sand to possibly use in some of our aircrete and in some of our builds. We'll see how much good sand I can get out of here. So I have a wheelbarrow, and I'm going to wheelbarrow it over to our house site. And then Red today is working on getting some of the electric started, so I'll show you a little of that.
The water line was in the same trench as the electric line, but about 8 inches below the electric line. So after I removed the electric line, I had to dig down deeper to uncover the water line and then get it freed up and then get some help pulling that through to the other side. Once both the water line and the electric line were on the correct side of the concrete strip, I was able to start working on getting them, stubbed up exactly in the right place, basically in the exact location that they will be in the finished house. And so I did some measuring and marked on the ground where that would be, and then dug trenches, and then kind of ran the lines to exactly the location where they need to be. And then I had my wife help me hold them in place while I bedded and packed dirt to get them to stay where I wanted them. And so that's what I'm working on here. The electric line's permanent home will be in the bathroom behind the door, so that's where the breaker box will be. And so, like I say, I have a drawing of the house and all the dimensions of the walls and doors and everything, so I can figure out exactly where that'll be by measuring from the outside perimeter of the footer. And so I'm able to actually bring up the wire exactly where it'll need to be in the wall. And then I'm also going to, mount an electric box, and that box will be in the exact place where it'll be in the bathroom behind the door. The water header that I'm putting in will be in the bathroom closet, right by the water heater. As I go along here working on the electric, I'm also working on completing the stub-ups for the drainage system, both the septic and the gray water systems. And so I'm working on the kitchen here, trying to get it's actually, will be going to the septic, and so I'm bringing up the main septic line and putting in a little vent line as well. So I'm working on that, and once I get done with the electric, then I'll run the water lines over. To mount the electric box and the water header, I wanted to pound in 2 metal posts for each, and then mount the electric box to 2 metal posts, and then the other 2 metal posts will be for the water header, and I was going to mount a piece of OSB board over that, which I'll be able to, mount all my pipe to. And so that'll give me a good platform in order to get it all laid out and firmly attached and affixed. And these are placed in the exact location that they'll be in the home, so when I pour the walls, I'll be pouring basically around or up to the box and also the water header. So they'll be integrated with the wall. I wanted to use metal to attach the box to, so I drove metal into the ground, and I just looked around for some metal, something that I had laying around already around the place. Metal's expensive these days, and I was able to find some scrap metal that worked great. I had some 1-inch square tubing that I used for the electrical box, and then had some other stuff that I used for the water header. But main reason I wanted to use metal is because it's going to be basically inside a poured aircrete wall. It won't deteriorate over time. It's just a robust material. So, and it also last until I get around to pouring the pad and pouring the aircrete.
While Red was working on the electric, I painted the temporary bathroom structure.
I mounted a 100 amp indoor box to the posts because it'll be indoor. Eventually I'll have to keep it covered, in the meantime. And then I started running conduit to various locations underneath the pad. And so I wanted to run everything under the pad in conduit. That way, if I needed to add something or if there was a problem with the circuit later on, I could diagnose and fix that and it wouldn't be any issue. It also protects the wire from abrasion and different issues. So I ended up using 1-inch PVC for the single or double circuit runs. And then there was a couple runs where I had to put a lot of wire in because I was going to be doing some 220 and some various things. And so I used 1.5 inch PVC for those runs. It was a bit of a challenge to design the utility layout that'll be underneath the pad. Since we're going to be pouring aircrete walls, 8-inch thick aircrete walls, they're not hollow walls like in normal construction. Normal construction, you just run all your utilities inside the hollow walls and fill in around them with some kind of an insulation. But with aircrete, it's a poured wall, and I wanted to minimize the amount of cutting and putting in conduit inside the aircrete. And so what I decided to do was to run everything underneath the pad and stub it up by the wall where it needed to come out and just go directly from the pad into the wall. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to figure out how to run all the water lines, to run all the electric lines to where they'll stub up right where they need to be, and it'll be real easy when we go to pour to the wall. So it's some upfront work here and a lot of head scratching and figuring out the best way to do it. But I think it's going to turn out really good, and it'll make the pouring process a whole lot easier. I'm running the conduit and the wires in the conduit at the same time. I don't want to have to come back later and try to pull everything through, so I'm doing it all at once. And so I'm kind of working on the conduit first, and then I'm going to go to water last and kind of bed it and bury it in that order. Some of the longer runs that go across the width of the house have a lot of wires in them because I'm taking several circuits over to the other side of the house. And so there's a lot of wire that I was putting through some of this 1.5 inch conduit. You'll see some black and red lines there. Those are actually some wire that I had left over from the solar system. I ordered way too much wire for the solar system. It was so cheap from China, and I ordered like 300 yards instead of 300 feet. So I had tons of this stuff left over. And it's great 8-gauge wire, which is what you need to run some kind of a 220 appliance. And so what I did was, instead of spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars buying 8-gauge wire, I used some of that solar wire and just cut multiple strands and ran it all in together in the same conduit with my Romex wire as well. We ran the wire through the conduit before it was all glued together. It's much easier to do it that way. And then once it was all in place, we went back and glued it together. I was really careful to put the glue only on the outside of the pipe and not on the inside of the coupling. That way when you put it together, the glue doesn't get on the inside and can get on the wire. Well, we've been working on utilities for a week or so, and now the forms are ready to come off and we're ready to get to the next stage. I'm dreading a little bit the forms coming off. I'm a little worried about that, so we'll see how it goes.